May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I want to invite you to think about something. What was a time in your life when you felt the most like yourself? The most like yourself. A time in your life when you felt like there was nothing that you needed to hide, that you were completely transparent and free to be exactly who you are and what you want to be. Maybe it's an event, an actual specific time when you're like, oh man, when I was doing that, or when I was with this group, or when I was in this space, well, I feel like there were no secrets. I was fully myself. Maybe it's more than once. Maybe there's a time of the week or a space in your house or in your work or with friends that when you are doing this thing, you feel in touch with who you are. I want you to hold on to that feeling and that thought and that space. Because in the gospel reading today, we heard the story of Jesus revealing a part of himself that his disciples had only glimpsed before. Parts that others hadn't been able to see. He went up to the mountain to pray with 3 of his closest friends, and while he was praying, his full self was revealed. His face changed. His clothes were dazzling white. Dazzling white. It was like everything was aligned. This was his glory. He was so fully himself that this was able to show the connection that Jesus had with God. And in this moment and in this space, he was able to go into the space with God and with these elders, these essential, central elders of the people of Israel, Moses and Elijah. They were talking about the events that were about to happen in Jerusalem. His arrest and trial and torture at the hands of the Roman Empire. And I'm drawn to this aspect of the story. This aspect of the story that tells us, right, that Jesus goes up into the mountain to pray because he knows what is coming. And we're going to spend a lot of time in this part of the story over the next 40 days as we enter the season of Lent. The hardest time of Jesus' life. The most difficult part of his ministry, where he witnessed and preached some important things, and he paid the price that comes from preaching and teaching truth and love. Things that threaten those who seek to amass power for themselves. Truth and love. But before he went to do that, he knew what was coming. He decided to go up to the mountain and spend some time with God, spend some time with his friends. James, John, and Peter always sort of show up in these important moments in Jesus' life. So he chose them to come with them. And he was inspired by the wisdom of Moses and Elijah. And they show up in this moment where Jesus revealed his true self. Now, mind you, the disciples had already heard about Jesus. They had seen him perform miracles. They had seen him do some things that were like, you are not like the rest of us. They knew something was special about him. Peter had even said, you are the Messiah. He'd already said that. But in this moment, they got to witness something miraculous, something incredibly different. They got to witness proof of the deep connection, the glory that Jesus shared from God, with God. And so I'm drawn to this notion that in this story we get to hear Jesus reveal the fullness of himself right before he goes through the most difficult moment of his life. I've been reflecting a lot on the idea of being our full selves. What does it mean for us to live in a way that is authentic and speaks our truth? Last week, I was invited to a panel where we were discussing the work of Bishop Marion Buddy of Washington. And we were asked a question about authenticity. Big thanks to all of you who came. There were a lot of people from St. John's. And one of my colleagues, talking about authenticity, said this: authenticity is not about being perfect, it's about being real. It's about peeling away the layers of expectations and shame and fear that have kept us small, and choosing instead to live as the fullest, freest version of ourselves. And authenticity is an act of courage, because when we live authentically, we disrupt the systems and narratives that benefit from our silence and compliance. Authenticity, I'm going to say that again. Authenticity allows us to disrupt the systems and narratives that benefit from our silence and compliance. Friends, I'm drawn to this idea of authenticity, of Jesus revealing his full self right before he's going to be tried and tortured by power of empire. Because the way that power and empire work is by reminding people that there's someone else out there for them to dismiss, to hate on, to misunderstand. There's someone else who's not quite like us, right? And by doing so, the powers of empire, those who want to amass power for themselves, get to divide. They get to divide us, right? As long as we're distracted by these people who are the reason why I'm living my life in a way that I don't want, these people who are the ones that I don't have a job, or these are the people who prevent me from practicing my faith the way that I want to practice my faith. As long as we're distracted, right, having to hide ourselves, dividing ourselves about who we are, then those who benefit from marginalization, from oppression, right, those who benefit from keeping financial gain for themselves, well, they are in good shape, as long as we don't push back, as long as we're distracted. But when we reveal the fullness of ourselves, when we speak out about who we are and who God has made us to be, then we're shining a light. We're shining that light of the revelation of God in our very hearts, in our minds, and in our bodies. And that light dispels the lie that we should be separated, that we should be suspicious of people who don't look like us, that we should be suspicious and dismissive of people who behave in ways that we don't find acceptable. Being fully, vocally open ourselves allows us to build unity and to shine a light of where true corruption lies, of where true division comes. We live in a time when many of us are scared to be our full and authentic selves in the world. For many marginalized people, the world feels fearful, filled with messages encouraging us to hide our true selves. And we hear things like, why do you keep making everything about sexuality? Why do you keep bringing up race all the time? Why do you keep shoving these things in my faces? Why can't you just go do that on your own time, in your private time? Hide. Don't reveal. But see, the thing is that we don't just hide things about our identities. That's not the only things that we hide. We also hide our needs, our struggles, our failures. I don't want anybody to know that I'm struggling with my job. I don't want anyone to know about my depression and hopelessness. I don't want anyone to know about my diagnosis and how my body is really handling treatment. Instead, we don't want to say those things. We want to portray strength and endurance and hope, even when we don't feel them. But when we end up having to hide parts of ourselves, which sometimes we do to protect ourselves, but when we do that, then it seems like there's this narrative that we are alone by ourselves. There's no one else like us. No one else experienced things like us. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe I'm odd, right? Everybody has it together and I'm not. And those are the ways that then we get divided. We can grow restless and anxious and suspicious of one another. But at the heart of the story of the Transfiguration, that's the story we hear today, the heart of it is the light of Christ. A light that is so bright that it hides nothing. It lays everything bare, the things that we knew, things that we didn't know, things we wanted to know, and things we didn't want to know. That's the thing about the light of Christ. It reveals truth. And sometimes that's not a comforting thing. A few weeks ago, we heard Simeon tell Mary, this child, who is now grown, but this child is destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. I think when we live authentically ourselves, our truth in the world, that makes other people uncomfortable. Maybe they're not living authentically. Maybe they don't realize what's going on in their own lives. But the truth is that it also helps others be seen and known. And it helps us see that we are not alone. That we are not just weird. We are not alone when we speak out our truth. I've been thinking a lot about Ryan Skates. He's been in my heart over the last few days. A Royal Oak High School student who died by suicide last week. I didn't know him personally. I wish I did. His friends at Stagecrafters talked about how Ryan brought light and laughter to those around him with an offbeat sense of humor and unwavering kindness. He was a member of the lighting team, so he helped to illuminate the stage. I feel like that's very fitting for our readings today. Light. I can only imagine how scary the state of the world was for him. This unwavering assault on trans people. A systematic campaign not just to marginalize or to demonize trans people, but to actively erase their existence. To make it seem like there's never been anyone in the whole history of humanity who has not fit into these arbitrary definitions of man and woman. And friends, believe me that these categories are arbitrary. Human beings are a beautifully complex combination of characteristics that God created. And even though many of us fit within specific sets of patterns, each and every single one of us is as unique as a snowflake in the middle of winter. From the very beginning of humanity, there have been people who express their gender differently. From the very beginning, there have been people who have loved differently. From the very beginning, there have been people who have spoken differently, understood God differently, their brains have worked differently, their bodies operated differently. Left-handed people have existed from the very beginning of creation. It's just that many of us have been punished for that difference. And so today, when we hear the story of Jesus being his full self right as he's going into the most difficult moment of his life, I am encouraged and strengthened and challenged about the ways that we are going to be true to ourselves, speak in love and truth and light, just who God has created us to be. Because when we speak, When we speak, others are seen. When we speak, we build community. We are not alone. Our speech, our truth, shines a light on the realities, and that challenges the powers that seek to separate us, that seek to extinguish the love that we are called to show in the world. Beloved, may you embrace your truth, your full self, the way that God has created you to be. And in speaking, you may encourage those around you who need to feel seen and known, not just by their Creator, but by our community, by all of us around us. Amen.